It is the 41st millennium, and mankind rules the stars.
I imagine a wall somewhere in England with the words Games Workshop Video Games splashed up it in gunmetal grey, at which a team of talented developers have been hurling ideas for over a decade and going with whichever ones don't immediately slide off. The result has been a mixed bag of genres and titles which, in total fairness, have almost all been above average in terms of quality. We've had third-person shooters, turn-based tactics, isometric looter RPGs, Left 4 Dead style team shooters and whatever the hell Necromunda Underhive is. And now we have Necromunda Hired Gun, a hodgepodge of ideas that feels like Doom Eternal 8 Ghost Runner with a side of Space Marine, went to bed and found this in the sheets in the morning. But before I start in on Necromunda Hired Gun, a brief history lesson. Around about 100 years ago, when the world was simpler and safer and everyone sort of got along because Twitter didn't exist, there was a game released on Xbox 360 and PS3 called Dead to Rights Retribution. It was a game about a cop with the coppiest name ever, Jack Slate, and his canine companion who went around solving crimes using the Max Payne rulebook, i.e. shoot and or maul everybody in slow motion bullet time while snarling one-liners and filling in the quiet with grizzled metaphors about cities bleeding, etc. It was a decent shooter for its time, using the dog to great effect to grab goons by the nuts and generally be the bestest boy on the block. This was kind of what I was expecting from Necromunda Hired Gun, which sold itself on the premise of a hardcore gun for hire plus tricked out canine companion. I assumed we'd be getting a balls out shooter like Doom Eternal with the added coolness of a doggy companion ready to rip and tear the nards off space punks on command. Sadly, Hired Gun is not quite that. Which is not to say it's bad, in fact it's pretty damn good in some areas, but it's one of the most inconsistent experiences I've had with a game in years. You play a mercenary in one of Warhammer 40k sprawling hive worlds, planet-sized foundries in which millions of humans clamour together to produce the oil and bloodstained technology that powers the Imperium of Man. Fans of Warhammer 40,000 need no explanations, while anyone not versed need only be educated by their own eyes. The Warhammer 40k universe is kind of like Mad Max times 1,000, but with space orcs, chaos gods and more metal than can safely be contained within a single property. It's awesome, frankly, and has grown into one of the most recognisable sci-fi properties of the last 30 odd years. It translates wonderfully into video game form too, particularly aesthetically. Hired Gun is kind of beautiful in a very twisted way. There's incredible detail in the environments that shows just how dedicated the devs are to bringing Necromunda to life. The between mission hub is a grimy bar called Martyr's End that resembles the scariest S&M club this side of Croydon, in which everyone is happy to stand around covered in engine grease and dried viscera, chatting in a way that seems at odds with a world that chews up and spits out humans like used engine parts. Crime is so prolific that bounty hunting is the #1 profession. Your protagonist is one such, a dangerously grizzled hardnut with a devil-may-care attitude and all the emotional depth of a discarded Bovril cup. Painful Lancashire accent aside, your character is more or less a cipher upon which you can impress whichever kind of backstory you want. You're a mercenary and you kill things for money. Beyond that, you pretty much just stand around while other people talk and try to pay attention to the details. Necromunda Hired Gun has elements of a looter-shooter in that you'll find colour-coded gear in chests throughout each mission, which you can choose to keep and equip or sell for credits at the end. Only the guns change in appearance, as your mostly hidden hireling only looks different on the menu screen if you switch out skins. You'll equip weapons, charms, gear accessories and armour to mitigate damage, while you can also visit a rogue dock to enhance yourself with cybernetic augments. These add extra dimension to the gameplay, such as the ability to slow time or heal from kills, and a grappling chain can be used to rip away enemy shields during gunfights. The shooting itself is quite literally hit and miss though. Enemies rarely throw themselves at you a la Doom, instead hanging back and shooting, although non-human enemies like gene stealers will zerg you for funsies. There's an aim assist option which simply doesn't work in my version of the game, which is the PS5 version, because it's bugged and it's sorely needed. Without it, the guns feel imprecise and sluggish, and I had to mess with sensitivity and dead zone settings just to feel comfortable. Also, despite 1,000 games using the same button layout that certainly ain't broke and certainly don't need fixing, Hired Gun chooses to chuck commands all over the face buttons and triggers to frustrating effect. Surely the dog will elevate this though, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest selling points. Sadly, no, not really. Despite being a big deal in the marketing, the Cyber Mastiff is underused and mostly ineffective. You summon it with a squeaky chew toy, whereupon it appears for a bit, highlights enemies through walls, savages whichever limbs or sexual organs have recently pissed it off, then gets shot and buggers off until a cooldown lets you summon it again. Rather than feel integral, the hound kind of feels like a class power that you can use for a bit. The writing could have made it more a part of the story, built a relationship between the mercenary and the beast, but it doesn't really bother to do that. As a result, it's very underwhelming as both a mechanic and a narrative element. In some respects though, the dog wouldn't really work any other way. See, Traversal is a mix of sliding, wall running and grappling that seems to ape last year's Ghost Runner, but with very little of the same style or fluidity. Executing enemies with melee attacks disrupts the flow of combat like a shiv in the throat, and bullet sponge brutes, robots or mini bosses necessitate backpedaling and circle strafing as opposed to any of the slick acrobatics you might expect with double jumps and grapples at your disposal. I have to confess too to occasionally suffering mild bouts of inertia after particularly energetic shootouts left me feeling giddy, partly due to all the leaping about and partly due to a frame rate that sometimes just gives up trying. The environments are drawn with visible care though. Atmosphere drips in ruddy globs from every grimy surface, drifts in ragged wisps from every cyborg head used as an ashtray, crackles in the fires of industry that burn and churn and endlessly turn. The world feels oppressive, dangerous, and there's a weird kind of beauty in all the flame and muck. Of course, the atmosphere threatens to come unstuck when enemies fail to react to point-blank plasma bolts in the face, but you can't have everything. Despite my many complaints though, Necromunda Hired Gun is a competent, loud and unashamedly grim shooter. The campaign won't take up more than a dozen hours, and the side missions, stripped down versions of the former with simpler objectives, will take up a few hours more, but this is no huge and sprawling shooter RPG. Now, if the devs had taken away just a handful of these elements and focused on reducing the jank in the movement and gunplay, this could have been a much more consistently entertaining shooter. As it stands though, it's decent, and fans of Warhammer 40,000 will certainly find enough hidden lore and visual nods to get a kick out of the world, but anyone just looking for a new first-person shooter to get stuck into might find it a little bit lacking, and for that reason I'm going to score Necromunda Hired Gun a 6.5 out of 10.
Delta 7. Far from where you want to be, I'll wager, but a better place than you'd be in otherwise, I can assure you.
Hi there, Mick Fraser here, hope you enjoyed that review. If you did, please consider hitting like and subscribe, maybe tag that bell icon too, so you're kept up to date with all of our content. And if you want to support us on Patreon, you can go ahead and do that. We appreciate everything that you guys do for us. In the meantime, I've been Mick Fraser for God is a Geek. That was a review of Necromunda Hired Gun, and you guys have been lovely. Bye.